Okay, so the news came out on Sunday, and the very first thing that crossed my mind when Brian Kelly was first fired is, I got to hear from Chessa Bouche on this. You have been firing warning shots, really, I would say from the beginning of the season about, hey, maybe let's find out what this team is. And then last week, Patrick asked you point blank, is this the next James Franklin? You said yes, and turns out you're right. Your initial reactions and then where you are a couple days after the big announcement there in Baton Rouge.
Well, I will tell you, Sunday is my first off day, and so I'm sitting there. I was getting ready to open up a margarita, and then the news broke, and I was like, oh, they're doing this. They're really doing this. And so, of course, I get called into work. Brian and I had to go do live shots for the next 3.5 hours outside football operations and trying to scope everything out. I was a little surprised just simply in the fact of because of the buyout. I think the way that this team absolutely collapsed in the second half against Texas A&M, they hadn't been beaten like that at home in a while. Actually, though, the worst loss at home over the BK era was 2022 against Tennessee, but that also Tennessee was a top 5 team, and they punched you in the mouth from jump. This one, you had a 4-point lead going into halftime, and they just absolutely folded. But I think it's a combination of everything we've seen this year. I will tell you, though, when Brian Kelly got hired, I was high on him because I felt like he had the pedigree. Right. I felt like he didn't have the roster to be able to win the national championships. He could get there, but he just needed the right roster. Well, then you open your mouth last year, Coach BK, and you talk about we're keeping receipts and we'll see you at the national championship. You can't say that, spend $18 million, and then flop like you did, especially with 3 losses before we're even in November. So to me, I felt like it was the right move. I understand that if you don't make this move, you've lost the team completely. You've lost this team. You've lost this roster, everybody. So I think they were doing a lot of damage control. But I will tell you, if you would have told me after the Clemson loss that 2 months later Brian Kelly would be out the door, I would have been like, "You're funny. That's a funny. That's not happening. $3 million. It's not going to do." And then, sure enough, here we are. Yeah. Wild. Absolutely wild.
Absolutely, it is. Now that his tenure is over, I think you made a great point last week, and you said it kind of tongue in cheek, but I think you really meant it, and I think it's a more of an umbrella issue. And you talked about how he's one of the only coaches that comes to LSU and loses weight. He just didn't. Yeah. It just felt like, from a fit perspective, just the LSU culture, it felt like no matter how good of an actual coach he was, he never fit the culture down there. Now that he's out and you can kind of put a bow on his tenure there, what do you make of what the decision was to get Brian Kelly? Because as you see there on your graphic, the 3 coaches before them, I know 2 of them were fired, but they all came back with a championship trophy.
Yep. Yeah, I thought that this was going to be a good hire. On paper, it looked like a great hire. You have a coach who had coached for over 35 years and only had 1 losing season. Again, I just felt like he needed to have the right roster. When you talk about putting $18 million into this roster and you're going all chips, everything on the table, and you come up short in back-to-back SEC games like they did, and then you lose in the manner that you did, you can't come back from that. And so to me, I can say that it's disappointing for how it all unfolded for Brian Kelly. And at first I was like, you know what? He's just I've heard things about him, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to try to form my own opinion. In the first year, I was impressed. I think he came out of the gate, especially with only having 36 guys on their roster when he took over the program. It was not in great shape, and I think he overachieved in year 1, which ultimately set the bar even higher than it already is in Baton Rouge. But I agree with a fit perspective. I don't like the whole fit, and Nick Saban was not from the South. Les Miles was not from the South. But what they did is they worked their tail end off, and they bled purple and gold. They went out and they were kissing babies, and they were asking for fan support. Brian Kelly was on the golf course. Yeah. Brian Kelly was at the beach. Brian Kelly did not take ownership when the games were lost. He always put it on, it's bad coaching, not, hey, it's on me. And so for me, I lost respect from him hearing how he handled situations like that, especially when you're the head coach of a program like LSU. It falls on you. It doesn't matter if that was your call or not your call. You hired that person to bring them in to make that call. and it didn't work. And you have to own it. He never owned it. Last week's press conference was the first time he said, "It's on me." But I think it was too late for him to say it's on me. So to me, I lost respect because I think he got the contract and the money because of his pedigree, and he wasn't willing to do the work. And we saw that, and that was the product on the field. And I think that the team didn't respect him. They respected Ed Ogeron because Ed Ogeron was at that facility. He lived, breathed, everything was LSU. I just felt like Brian Kelly came in for a paycheck and wanted a natty, but didn't want it enough. And so I think that's the product that we saw on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to him flaming the reporter for asking about the offense earlier in the year, and I mean, as we've seen how that's turned out, it turns out that they were right about the whole thing because, I mean, Joe Sloan's gone now too, but I got to go back to what I asked you last week, and it stems around, is Brian Kelly James Franklin? Well, I made a comment on the show yesterday saying that Brian Kelly is the Nick Saban of James Franklin's. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is that a little too harsh?
I would have to agree with that. I mean, being 5-11 against ranked teams, you are what your record is, and that's what sucks is that he's won a lot of ball games, but he's not won a lot of meaningful games, and that doesn't cut it in the SEC. That doesn't cut it in Baton Rouge. Fans are there supporting this team. People that may not even have enough money to pay their light bill, but they're going to put money down to go watch an LSU game, and you can't even put a good product on the field. There's no relatability with Brian Kelly, and I think that's ultimately what played out is that he just was not a great leader. I think his two worst mistakes was when he took over this program. He got rid of Corey Raymond, who's the godfather of DBU. That was his biggest mistake, and we saw that in the secondary years to play out, and it's just now coming back with him bringing him on 2 years ago and then letting Blake Baker go. I think Blake Baker did a hell of a job with the linebackers and what he did, and he should have never left the building. And Brian Kelly was quick to bring his guys in and then realize this is not going to work. And so I think the coaching staff and what he brought in, rather than really doing his due diligence and figuring out who he wanted on that staff, he was a little lax about it and brought in guys that didn't fit what it takes in Baton Rouge.
Absolutely. Now, in my opinion and several others, this job is now the #1 job in all of college football. Let's spin it forward to who is next, both a realistic way and the way that they'll go about this search from a timeline perspective as they move forward.
I will tell you, I am a bit concerned because I'm not sure if y'all know or not, LSU doesn't have a president. So the governor has stepped in, and he's a loose cannon as it is. He brought in a fake Mike the Tiger last year, and it was a disaster. And so it's one of those things of, it scares me that he has not full control, but he's got a say-so in this. So I don't know which way you go. I will tell you, before with Scott Woodward, I believed in him because he brought in Kim Mulkey. He brought in Jay Johnson, and he's very direct and very precise in what he does and the way he does things. So, but when you have the buyout and he did the deal at A&M with Jimbo Fisher, and then he did the deal with Brian Kelly, I'm like, man. But speaking of candidates, if I had a magic wand and money and said, this is the guy that LSU brings in, I would bring in Dan Lanning. And I say that because I think Dan Lanning has been a huge success at Oregon. Obviously, we don't have the Nike money. We're not on that level. But I think you have the resources here. I think him at Oregon, he's got an easier path to the college football playoffs. So does he want to leave that? But is he that true competitor of, hey, I want to go toe-to-toe with Kirby Smart and the Georgias and show Alabama who they are now that Nick Saban's not there. That's who I would bring in. I think he's done a terrific job at Oregon. I think he's also brought in some quality coaches who are now head coaches, and that speaks volumes of who is on his staff. And that's when you're successful in this industry, it's because of who you hire as your coaching staff, and he's done a great job. So me, that would be him. I'm sure – I know that Lane Kiffin is going to be targeted. I don't know if Lane is because he got passed up last time and didn't get a call when they hired BK, and he is a petty Betty, I don't know if he even really goes with that, or he's going to be like, nah, y'all passed last time, I'm going to do it here. But Lane has to look in the mirror and say, do I have the resources at Ole Miss to win a national championship?
Correct.
If he feels that he does, I don't think he leaves.
Right.
But I definitely think he'll listen to the call.
Yeah. But
again, I don't know if Lane is able to let that go, because he knows how to troll, and he's kept receipts, and that motivates him every morning. But I'd rather have a coach like Lane Kiffin, who has someone to beat and wants to be there and is willing to do the work, than someone like Brian Kelly, who's done this for a long time and won a lot of games, but not won a lot of meaningful games.
Absolutely. Chessa Bouche, you're the best. Thank you so much for joining us here at Southeast Sports Plus.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Y'all have a good one.
Absolutely.